Chairman David Danda.
Here.
Vice Chairman Forrest Reynolds. Vice Chairman Reynolds.
Here.
Secretary Treasurer Reina.
Here.
Director Alonso Cantu. Director Alonso Cantu. Director Paul Moxley.
Here.
Director Frank Pardo.
Here.
Director Joaquin. Director Joaquin Spammer. Director Joaquin Spammer. So, Chairman, you have a quorum.
Great, thank you. Let's go ahead and do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands
one nation,
under God,
indivisible,
with liberty and justice for all. Invocation.
God of peace, we invite you to preside over this meeting. Even if we have different opinions, give us unity and spirit. Help us to work as a united team in combining ideas for a great outcome. Direct our thoughts, words, decisions, and actions toward the right path and help us stay on track. Let your will be done as we plan and make decisions. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Let's go ahead and call the workshop to order. Hila.
Yes, sir. The
And
first
item number one.
Yeah, item one is update on State 68 and 69 future project development. We have on the line, chairman and directors. We have Pete Alvarez, the district engineer, and his staff on the line, and I'll go ahead and turn it over to them on the update.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Margil Maldonado. I'm the Advanced Project Delivery Supervisor here with TxDOT, and I'm also the project manager for the two projects in question, I-69 Connector and SH68. If you can advance the slide, please, Eric. So before every meeting, we always have a safety minute, and so as everybody probably realized this weekend, we did have some rain come in. The roads were pretty slick and pretty dangerous out there, so just be mindful that, if you're anything like me and you do your Christmas shopping late, the traffic is really bad out there. With this past weather, I always try to keep in mind the Smith system training that we have in TxDOT, basically leaving yourself a good way out of a situation. You don't want to be surrounded by a bunch of vehicles. And also you want to make sure you have enough room between yourself, your vehicle, and the vehicle in front of you. That's going to ensure that you if something does happen in front of you, you do have an opportunity to steer clear of that. And at the end of the day, we all want to go back home to our families, especially during this time. And so before I begin, just want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year coming up before I finish this presentation. Next slide, please. Okay, thank you, Eric. So what you're seeing on the screen here is a combination map of both the SH68 project and the 4 primary routes that we're looking at for the I-69 connector. Obviously, north is up, and you can see those multicolored lines there. They're labeled A, B, C, and D. Those are the I-69 primary routes that we're looking at now. They stretch from I-69C all the way to I-69E. And then on the left side, intersecting those routes, you can see in a magenta colored dotted line there, that's the SH68 project that you're all familiar with. That's where it intersects with, those possible routes. Next slide, please. So where are we at with this I-69 connector study process? So if you recall, we did have a meeting with stakeholders where we just identified a study area. That study area was about 400 square miles wide. And, from that point on, we had several meetings and after those meetings, we had some alternative screening analysis in which we looked at 15 preliminary corridor alternatives. we whittled that down to the 4 primary corridor alternatives. And so now we're at a point now where we've had a public meeting back in November to look at those primary corridor alternatives. And we've taken comments from the public. We took a MetroQuest survey online, and we're in the process now of looking at those comments and addressing them. So as you can see there in the red text, we are here where we're looking at trying to determine a recommended corridor alternative. Next slide, please. Just to kind of briefly go over this, we had 15, what we called the 15 preliminary corridor alternatives. They were developed based on a technical work group and public input, traffic studies, engineering, and environmental constraints. As part of that 400 square mile study area that we looked at, we identified 3 zones. We call them the central, the north, and the south zone. As part of the south zone, we had 7 corridor alternatives. And then as part of the central zone, we had 4 corridor alternatives. And in the north zone, we had 4. Each of those zones, we had a new location roadway just to give us that flexibility to see if to try to minimize as much impacts as possible. Next slide, please. And here's a map showing all those 15 routes. You can see the northern ones there colored in blue. They're labeled N3, N2, NNL, and N1. The central ones are in orange, and they're labeled C1, C2, C3, CNL. And then the southern routes are in green, or they have labels green, and so you can see those there. Next slide, please. As part of the alternatives analysis, we looked at several criteria. We judged those criteria both quantitatively and qualitatively to come up with the 4 routes, as you can see here on the screen. We looked at the number of parcels that were impacted. We looked at the residential parcels that were impacted, agricultural, colonias, and all these good environmental stuff. We looked at goals and objectives, the length of the facility, the construction cost. And so those were the major criteria that we looked at when we looked at at whittling down to 4. Next slide, please. So goals and objectives, we looked at those, as I mentioned earlier. The North Zone corridors were eliminated from further studies because they didn't meet those studies' goals and objectives, which obviously that's very important for a project. Traffic also was something that eliminated the North Zone as they didn't eliminate, or they didn't reduce the number of traffic that was on I-2, which was one of our goals and objectives. The best performing South Central Zone corridors were carried forward because they did carry a lot more traffic from I-2 and thus relieving that route. And then some of the engineering parameters also, the South Central Zones were lower in terms of right-of-way requirements and the environmental impacts. So, for that reason, that's why those South and Central Zone corridors were moved forward. Next slide, please. And so again, here's a map showing those 4 primary routes. We saw earlier, and everything that's bounded in red is that study area, that 400 square mile study area that we looked at. Again, these routes were presented at a public meeting that we had back in November. We had 2 meetings actually. One was at the Precinct 4 offices, and then the other one was over in Rio Hondo. Next slide, please. So the next step is, as you can see here, we have an arrow identifying where we're at in terms of we did have that open house number 2 back in November. What we want to work through here is we want to identify a recommended corridor alternative. We want to establish a purpose and need for the project, and then we want to prepare a NEPA classification letter. At that point, once we do have a NEPA classification letter, that will, basically direct us in which direction or in which kind of environmental document we will need to produce as part of this project. We're looking at hopefully starting the preliminary design and environmental studies spring of next year. And so we're working now to try to get, we're going to have to make some decisions pretty quick as to, coming up with a recommended corridor alternative, and then starting with the schematic and environmental services. Next slide, please. So before we move on to the SH68 project, any questions or concerns on I-69 connector?
No.
Okay, so moving on to the SH68 recommended preferred alternative here. As you all may recall, we had a public hearing back in 2018, and we identified what we call the RPA, which is the recommended preferred alternative, and that's what you see on the screen here in purple. Stretches all the way from I-2 in the Donna area all the way north to just north of the airport, North Edinburgh, there on US 281. Next slide, please. Again, just a quick status of where we are now. We did look at a study area for this project. In this particular case, we had 9 preliminary alternatives, and then we whittled that down to 3. And as I mentioned earlier, we had a recommended preferred alternative back in 2018. Next slide, please. So what are the next steps on this project? We're looking to continue to evaluate the RPA as well as the added design modification. If you recall, we did have a meeting back in 2019, I believe it was, where we had a design modification in between Monte Cristo and SH 107. We also had, in that time, we had the value engineering study, which necessitated some geometric changes to the schematic. And so because of that, we're going to have to do part of a reevaluation. We're thinking that if we do need a public meeting, we'll probably have that back in spring of 2023. What we're also doing is we're continuing to field verify impacts for the preparation of the final environmental impact statement. And ultimately, we want to get a record of decision, hopefully by the summer of 2023, if not sooner. Next slide, please. Just this slide is basically, if you want any more information on these projects, I have provided some links there in this presentation. I-69 connector obviously is there, and then the SH68. You can go to the text.dot website, and if you don't want to go type in that link, you can just go to the search box and type in either I-69 connector or SH68, and that'll take you to the most recent information that we have on those projects. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Are there any questions?
Well, they just tell us that they're studying. They don't really tell us too much as to.
Pete, can you address that, please?
Good evening, everyone. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you. First of all, let me thank Mahid. I appreciate the presentation. I want to thank David and the rest of the board for allowing us this opportunity to give you an update. The NEPA process is a very complicated process, as you well know. We are doing the various studies. We've narrowed many of the, there's so many alternatives. We have narrowed them down, and we're really getting to the point here with both State Highway 68 and the I-69 connector to be able to finalize what those recommendations are going to be and get the environmental clearance. And so, yes, Mr. Reyna, yeah, we have done a whole bunch of studies. We'll continue to do those studies and bring these projects to fruition. I want to remind the board, just like you all would, 365, currently you're working in IBTC, State Highway 68, and ultimately the I-69 connector will provide great transportational connectivity when it comes to the freight, right, the trucks and what have you, to connect everything along the border up north, and then connect also to I-69E or US 77, and of course US 281 I-69C. I'm looking at our network as a whole, whether they're on system or off system. I think we all have an obligation to our great region to continue to develop these projects. They do take time, as we all know. Many of our projects do take time, but that's okay. Just like the RMA continues to work on your all's system projects, and we fully support those, we too at TxDOT will work on the on-system. And one day we will have Toll 365, IBTCs moving forward, State Highway 68, and I see, boom, great opportunity for the entire region to have improved connectivity, safer routes that will be able to carry that freight and trade, if you will. I want to see if there's any additional questions that we may be able to answer for you all.
Zeke, did you want anything clarity? You're trying to find out where exactly? Is that what you're looking for?
Yeah, I mean, Pete, I appreciate what you and your staff are saying, but it's a lot of technical stuff to us. You guys sound like lawyers.
You mean that in a good way, right?
I mean, like, none of us are engineers here, and a lot of us are businessmen. We just kind of want to put our heads together and just kind of tell us where's the state of in really general lingo. I mean, where are these projects in relation to our project? You know, we're going with the IBTC pretty soon, and tell us, are you in line with the state 68 with the work that we're doing? Just
Yes.
simple terms like that.
Yeah, so that's a great point. I mean, we have to be, it's like when a lawyer talks to me, I have to ask for clarification, right? It's the same thing. I will share with you, Mr. Reina, where IBTC is going to be touching I-2. It's in the same location where we're proposing State Highway 68 to touch. In fact, in my mind, we're going to have an interchange there, right there by the Rivera equipment, if you will. And so 68 alignment is very clear. We had to make one modification due to some concerns that were brought to our attention. When it comes to I-69 connector, we narrowed it down from, I think it was 15 down to 4. Based on the comments that we receive, and we're going to analyze all those, we're going to come up with a preferred alternative. And at that point, you'll see one line as opposed to all 4 lines. And so that'll clear up the picture, if we will. I knew it was a little crazy to see the 4 alignments there. Eventually, we're going to pick one as the preferred alternative, and it would be very clear at that point where we're going to be going.
Because we're in the same business as you are, to a lot less minute. Pete, are you going to kind of share with us, or going to let us do some input on that corridor between I-69E and Central? I mean,
yes. Yeah,
right?
so that was one of the primary reasons for sharing this information today. When we have public meetings and public hearings, you all have collectively as the Hidalgo County RMA Executive Board or as an individual the right to provide opinions and recommendations for our consideration. I believe we have an established process that at the end of the day, I think it's going to benefit the entire region.
Well,
So yeah, once we finalize, we'll share with you what that final preferred alternative is going to be, so
well,
that you can update your maps. And
that's my question, Pete. Before you finalize it, is there any way, Pilar, that we can have some input into it? I mean, that's what we're here for.
So to answer your question, Director, yeah, through the public involvement process that TxDOT is going through, our authority is invited to that to have input into the process. So just like all the other stakeholders that are involved in the project, we have the same opportunity to provide input.
What mechanism or modality are you going to use to do that, Pilar? How will you participate?
TxDOT specifically from us solicits comments on the project. We get a formal notification from them, and they ask us to, they'll lay the project out, and then they'll ask us to put our comments, and we'll provide those. Ours tend to be more technical than the general public because we're a public agency and we've got that type of information to contribute. But yes, TxDOT does let us have input.
yeah, and I would remind everybody, and I want to recognize Pilar, Ramon, and Eric that participated in our kickoff meetings. We had a meeting in Weslaco. They were there present. They provided some recommendations, some thoughts, and that helped initiate the whole process. And so your staff was there, invited, and participating in those kickoff meetings. So I want to thank your staff for that.
Thank you very much. We appreciate that.
Alrighty, as always, if there's any further questions at any time, please feel free to reach out to me or the staff, and we'd be more than happy to provide you a response. Thank you, and I hope.
Merry Christmas to you, Pete, and thank you so much. Let's
yes,
go ahead
sir.
and move on to workshop item number 2. Pilar?
Yes, Chairman, Directors, it's a review of the proposed fiscal year 2022 operating capital budget. If you recall, a couple of months ago, we had a workshop item where we reviewed the budget with the board, the proposed budget for fiscal year 2022. That budget was sent to TxDOT. We received a response from TxDOT. They had no comments on our proposed budget. So we're here basically with no changes to it as far as TxDOT's concerned. But we're proposing an $8.4 million budget for fiscal year 22. Remind the board that our fiscal year is January 1st to December 31st of the calendar year. 2.9 of the 8.4 is for operations, 4.7 million is for combined debt service, and we have 700,000 programmed for project development. The budget's divided into 4 departments. We have the administration, which is approximately $1.2 million. We have the construction department, which is a little over $1 million. And then we have program management department, which is approximately $700,000. And then we have the right-of-way operations department, which is $4,000. We have in the current budget, the 2021 budget, we have 17 positions budgeted, and we're carrying those over into fiscal year 2022. So those remain the same. There's no change in the number of positions. The difference is that those historically we had not hired 6 of those positions or 7 of those positions because they were all programmed for construction. With the award of the 365 tollway project, now we will be hiring those staff, and there will be 5 inspectors and 2 administrative support staffs members that go with that. And so the compensation for the different divisions consists of, as administration, it's approximately 760,000, construction 854,000, and then program management is 597,000. Our budget also reflects debt service for the Series 2013 vehicle registration fee bonds and the Series 2020A and 2020B vehicle registration fee bonds. So we still have a coverage ratio of 1.76 or and 397 days of working capital in our budget. So if there's no other, there's no other questions, there will be an action item in your regular agenda to adopt this budget. So I'll answer any questions the board may have. I think. Yes, sir, Director.
Go ahead, Director. Frank, go ahead. Frank, did you have a question?
No, it might have been. No, it wasn't me.
Forrest, did you have a question?
No, I'm good, David.
Okay. When do you plan on hiring these people, Pilar?
We've already started the process. We've already solicited the positions. They've been posted and advertised, and Ramon has already started the interview process for hiring these positions. So we've actually been at it for about 60 days, lining up people to hire.
Okay.
David, actually, I do have a question. This is Forrest. And actually, Pilar and I have talked about this. My only concern is, Pilar, that you've got the staff needed to manage through 365, that being inspections, and are you comfortable with where you are, Pilar, and with where you think you can be? It's the task is once they start construction is going to be quite a task, is it not? Given inspections and that could happen during the middle of the night, could it not? I mean, are we staffed up to manage through that? Or are you going to sub some of that out, Pilar? How do you plan to go about that?
It'll be a combination of both in-house staff, director, and consultants to get the job done. This is a huge project. This is a 12.2 miles of roadway, controlled access facility with pretty much every element that you can think of in a heavy highway project. And so we are going to have in-house staff, and they're going to be augmented with our consultants that'll help us manage the project. To answer your question, it's a combination of the two.
But given the time to construct, the amount of money to spend, and what we've allocated for time to complete, are you're comfortable with where you are in regard to how you presented things?
Yes, sir. What Ramon has asked me to consider is possibly maybe another inspector or two above the 5 that we have in the program. And so as soon as we hire the first bunch, we may come back to the board with a mid-year budget amendment to hire a couple of inspectors. And it's not until we sit down with the contractor and we look at the schedule and look at his timeline for all the different elements, is that when we're really gonna get a handle on how aggressive the construction schedule is. And that'll dictate whether or not we need to come back to the board and look for some additional staff.
Okay, thank you.
And you'll keep us abreast of that, correct, Pilar?
Yes, sir, we will.
All right. Any other questions on workshop item number 2? If not, can we move on to workshop item number 3?
Yes, this is a presentation on wetland mitigation for the 365 tollway and the IBTC. I'm going to ask Eric Davila to come and give the board his presentation.
Good evening.
Hello, Eric.
Y'all able to see the slideshow on the screen?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Okay. It's also in the board packet. Just very briefly, this mitigation, wetland mitigation component is important to the overall program. So that's why we kind of broke it out and had a separate walkthrough. So why is it important? Well, from a development timeline standpoint, we had an environmental document for the SH365, which is now 365 tollway, which will be entering construction in early 2022. In it, in that environmental document, we had some impacts to mitigate with regard to jurisdictional wetland areas. So we identified spots along the alignment of the right-of-way that we eventually acquired, which essentially require us to atone for having disturbed those areas that the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers deemed, in this case, emergent wetland. So after we got environmental clearance, we had some post-NEPA exercises to do, which included essentially going and talking to the Army Corps about this and getting our permit, which ended up being an individual permit. And at the end, although we identified 12 acres of mitigation that needed to get dealt with in this particular project, the RMA was also thinking for the bigger picture. We have a loop that we're trying to develop, and so we have future projects. And so instead of just focusing on the 12 acres that would have been a fairly easy fix, we had to think about the entire loop and essentially securing that location. And so we did that. We acquired an 80-acre tract of land, which was formerly from part of the Sakai family farm. And and I'll show you guys a picture in a minute as to why it is that we selected it. We then, finished our application and we received what was called an individual permit. We ended up permitting for 17 acres, partially because one of the biggest drivers is that we have the International Bridgeway Corridor project that we were also developing at that time. So we knew that if the IBTC, for instance, had some need for mitigation that had similar characteristics to what we had permitted for, that we might be able to essentially utilize some credits there on the additional 5 acres that we're developing in this particular permit. So within, from 2020 to 2021, we've also had to renew the permit since the permit was acquired for going into the original construction, which was for late 2017, early 2018. Now that we've had some time elapsed and are here doing the rebid and now going back out, in this case, to the bond market to go into construction, we needed to renew that. So we took care of that and we extended it for another 5 years. And so one of the requirements of that land development is that acreages that that are going to be utilized, for the wetland area, be partnered up with a third-party conservation easement holder. And in this case, that was the Valley Land Fund easement, a conservation easement that we brought to the board earlier this year. So all this basically sets the stage for, we've got the land, we've got the permit, we know what we need to do. It's very scripted. And so, to get that off the ground with the massive construction project we have coming our way, there's a need to, get as much help as we can to get it done within the time frame we have. And I'll elaborate on that in just a second. This is the site. The site itself is an 80-acre tract shaped somewhat like a Y. The Rio Grande is here on the bottom of the exhibit. And the two U.S. Fish and Wildlife, tracts of land that are right next to it, essentially provided some opportunities for us. If we are to essentially revert portions of this site back to wetland, back to the condition of the neighboring tracts, then we have a great potential for creating additional wildlife corridors, which we want to do when we're doing these types of projects. When you see those opportunities, you kind of take them. But they're also in areas that are already established wetlands. So they give us, some nice baselines to compare against. This area is formerly wetland, the neighbors are wetland. So if we basically go in there and do what we need to do to revert it back to wetland, it should be successful in the long term. So at least that was the frame of thinking when they permitted this particular site. The site itself that has to be developed is 23.88 acres of that entire 80-acre tract. And as projects come online, we would essentially look at, how much wetland would need to be developed in those particular projects. We would then come and scope that with the Army Corps of Engineers accordingly. And, kind of like the loop has different environmental documents, this area will also have different permits that kind of work toward the greater goal of retransforming or reverting this area to wetland. So the need was essentially to build that 22.88 acre mitigation site. The big constraint is time. Time and money obviously is always the big drivers. And in this case, once we begin construction of that wetland, it has to be completely done in 6 months. So you begin turn dirt, 6 months, you must be done per the core criteria. So that's kind of a short-term big push. But the other is the long-term perspective. The Army Corps permit also has essentially 5 years of inspections that you must do and records that you must provide, including a final walkthrough with them that requires them to sign off on the site saying, yes, you've accomplished what you set out to do in this particular permit. Essentially just keep operating and, vaya con Dios, you create a wetland, congratulations. And we just continue to operate it, and it's something that we do to mitigate for our projects. So, in order to do this, we need to, plan for meeting the criteria set out in the permit. We need to design for these particular sets of plants, grasses, shrubs, and trees that we need. We also need to water that. We need to construct it. So construction management component comes into play. We need to maintain it. We need to essentially what we design and install must be maintainable and of low enough maintenance that it's to the overall benefit of the authority. So we need to think very carefully about the design decisions that we make and how much water we decide to take out and how much electricity we need to run on those pumps. To do all that, it's a big optimization exercise, essentially. And then we need to monitor it. We have our 5-year monitoring requirement, and U.S. Army Corps basically looking over our shoulder for those first 5 years. So to get that done, we're going to need environmental support, engineering support, construction. Essentially we'll have to farm that out to a site civil contractor. And as part of what makes this the scopes that we have before you all today, later in the agenda, unique, is that Blanton and Associates, not only is providing the environmental support, Blanton is, and HDR is doing the engineering support, which is all the site civil, water source, and site inspection, during construction, is that at the end of the day, Blanton is also helping us plant this entire area to meet those permit requirements for the 17 acres that we said we would develop. And the surrounding 23.88 acres, even though that's not wetland, there's still going to be some planting required in those particular areas to make it that habitat that we said we would be creating. And then the maintenance would be monitoring the water well and doing the semi-yearly inspections. Basically RMA is going to have boots on the ground. While we're in construction, it's literally just next to the 365 tollway project. You can kind of see. Let me go back. Let me go back. Yeah. to the map. The 365 tollway, as you all can see on this map, is just adjacent to this wetland site. So we'll be out there kind of doing all these things somewhat at one time. And so what does that require? So the division of labor is placed in your board packet this particular presentation. It shows the major activities that take place to get this done and the total subtotal for those activities. So we have preliminary design, which is heavy to the engineer, of course, but Blanton and Associates, who was there to help us renew the permit, is very familiar with the master planning components of it. Essentially, what are the plant species that must go in there? What do we have to accommodate for? Within those plant species, there's going to be some watering requirements. And so there's going to be some collaboration between those two teams that takes place in preliminary design and the final design. The final design is going to require essentially plant selection and procurement. And that's the procurement is of both the planting elements that are going to go into this particular site and the procurement of the contractor that we need for the site civil improvements. There's some bid phase support budget for HDR, who's going to be the engineer helping us out with that. And then in terms of construction oversight, there are certain ways that this particular contractor is going to have to operate. And so there's oversight from the environmental standpoint, which is very important in how you prep the site, to revert it from what was formerly farmland to now this wetland site. And on the flip side, you also have the technical requirements of the construction oversight, which are being provided by an HDR representative on the engineering side, water well, installation, site grading, berm, all that stuff that is going to be important, irrigation, design and layout, all those elements, work together to basically deliver the site. Then we get into construction. The construction here in this case is the wetland planting that we referenced earlier, and that's being done by Blanton and Associates. So they will essentially give us a plant list, tell us the vendors that can provide it in the quantities that we need, and RMA will go out and secure those and bring them to the site, get it all delivered, and they'll be installing them. That's then going to be followed by, assuming all the construction is complete within those 6 months, we begin what's called success inspections, which is for that first year. It's Blanton and Associates coming out and making sure that the site takes. There's going to be everything done to make it a success, but watching it over time and making adjustments, for seasonal and/or events that happen like a freeze or hurricane. All those things, will play into how we end up operating the site, and essentially, tweaks that we might have to do to make sure that we maintain it for the purpose that we're trying to build. Pretty heavy up front, but it's to cover the entire year of them making site visits and, gathering data. And then we go into the U.S. Army Corps inspection. For 5 years, they have a budget to go out, conduct the site inspection that they need to do, and provide the reporting necessary back to Army Corps to assure them that we've got the site moving forward as intended. And that happens for 5 years, and that 5th year is the one where we hopefully get the sign off. And so this scope is, like I said, pretty heavy. In the next year, you all the way through construction, which is the 4 rows of sub-items. But then you have essentially 6 years of activities that follow here, where it's just construction, wetland planting, all the way through the reporting in the 5th year. So at the end of the day, we've got a 6-year scope within those 2 items, and that's pretty much it. So in conclusion, I just lay out and summarize here what each consultant has in their work authorization that is in the agenda later on for today's meeting. The construction cost is also included in our capital expense layout that we have in the finance plan. And then, we want to note that this site is going to takes a lot of heavy lifting on the front end to revert it to farmland. But once you do this heavy lifting on the front end and you successfully deliver this many acres of wetland, it just becomes a means of essentially bringing other cells online as you need them with future projects. As long as they're for RMA projects, and are there to mitigate wetland impacts and coordinate with the Corps. This site basically secures a future where we can move forward with environmental clearances and have a site that we can build around and expand as needed, as approved by everyone, to make sure that that we have everything we need. And so there's going to be a lot of upfront lifting that these scopes do, but then you just kind of tack onto them and add on to them. And so with that, I'll entertain any questions you have.
Are there any questions from anyone?
Well, pretty technical.
Yeah.
Yeah, Chairman and
I have a
Directors,
question.
go ahead, Chairman.
I have a question on all this engineering fees and stuff. I mean, are we gonna hold them to these? And how good are the studies? How long are the studies good for?
So there's not, it's really not study, Chairman. This is actually a lot of design work, and we go and build it, plant it, and then it's monitoring post-planting to make sure that the different plant species take and survive. And so the part of the reason that I wanted to have this workshop with the board is because we talked a lot about building the road, but we hadn't talked any about some of the mitigation we have to do to the environmentally sensitive land. And this is one of those, you know, I thought it was, we bought a piece of land and we just let Mother Nature take it over and it was a wetland. And it's not that simple. We have to actually plant native species. We've got to make sure that we have non-native stuff that's invasive is not in there. And so it's some pretty strict criteria. So that's why we have to put this effort in it. It's budgeted. I mean, we have it part of the project budget, but we really never have talked about it to the board. We've never discussed this with the board. So we want to kind of introduce it to you because this is just one of those necessary elements that we have to do. We don't have a choice. That's part of the permitting process from the Army Corps of Engineers that we have to comply with.
Okay. I just thought it was looks like a big expense on our part, right?
It is a very big expense, but we don't have a choice on this, Chairman. It's part of the permit we received to build the project, and in order to give us the permit to build the project, we had to comply with these environmental mitigation. And so that's why we kind of want to talk to the board about the effort that went in there and why we had to do it. Because again, I thought it was as simple as buying the land and then just letting Mother Nature take over, and it's not that simple. So.
Okay. All right. If there are no other meetings, let's adjourn the workshop, and I'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. We've already established quorum. That's the reports.
Yes, sir. First item is the report on program manager activity for the 365 Tollway project and IBCC environmental clearance document. And I can give you a brief report.
So that one particular component was, legwork for 365 that must take place. And so right now, I'll kind of skip to for the 365 Tollway. So we're at the point now where, we have finalized the work effort of change order number 1 with police construction. They have provided, essentially exhibit concepts and more importantly, cost savings that we've been able to coordinate, and give comment on. It's been a very dynamic process, and then they've been a very dynamic partner and very responsive. So we appreciate all that. So basically brings us to the change order number 2 today, which was distributed a little earlier this afternoon. So we're here on the schedule where we're at the point where the board can evaluate and decide to approve change order number 2. Change order number 2 has already been priced into the financial model, and so I'll let Richard elaborate more on how that rolls into the proposed plan of finance. But at the end of the day, we are actually begin meeting with rating agencies, and I know you probably have the more exact schedule along these lines, but essentially end of this year, beginning of the next, we'll be working those particular channels so that we can essentially close on those toll revenue bonds by early February and begin construction in March. And so that's the schedule that we've been able to hold. and everything working out well with the financing, we'll be able to push forward. Any questions on 365 Tollway?
Good.
Not hearing any. I'll go to the IBTC and be very brief. The IBTC, we've essentially received, not only have we received confirmation that the schematic is approved, that was about a month ago that we received. We have also received approval for the environmental document. So the actual chapters, document, technical docs that go with it have been approved. What we're pending at this point is what's called the notice for an SFP, which is sufficient for further processing. And that allows us to schedule the public hearing. So we anticipate to hear a little more from TechSouth very early in the year about that, so that we can go ahead and begin scheduling the public hearing. Once you have the public hearing, you essentially bring the information back out to the public one last time and showcase it, and just remind them about the project that we kicked off in the public meeting. And then once you do that, you essentially address any comments you have, and hopefully you close the environmental process, without any major incident or any new surprises. And so we're still anticipating that happens early next year. So between March and April, we should be seeing the environmental process hopefully close on this, and then be able to move into right-of-way acquisition and other development phases, which are very important in getting the project delivered. So, any questions on the IBTC?
No questions.
All right. Well, then, thank you all.
Thank you. Let's go to regular item 3B. Resolution 2021-73, adoption of the fiscal year 2022 operating capital budget for Hidalgo County Regional Mobility Authority.
Yeah, Rich. Chairman, we still have one report from our financial advisor. Would you like to hear that report?
Yes, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Go to item report B, I guess, on 365 tollway project financing.
Good evening, Chairman, Directors, Richard Ramirez, the Health Officer here. So Eric mentioned finalized the negotiations on the value engineering with the contractor. So that afforded us, I guess, in construction, a contract number that helped us get a finance plan, at least in the final stages, to review with the rating agencies. We actually have a meeting tomorrow morning with Standard & Poor's, and then in the afternoon at 1 o'clock we have a rating meeting with Moody's. So right now, as we the financing is going to be for a total amount of $207,427,000 and some change. So that affords us to put about close to 200 million, 199 million into the construction fund, and then funding the capitalized interest during construction, as well as debt service reserve fund that we have to fund as part of the bonds, and then to pay for the cost of issuing the bonds. We hope to be able to receive the ratings back in early January. Right now, we're telling the rating agencies that we want the rating back on the 7th of January so we can post the offering document. However, this process took a little longer, so they told us they're gonna try their best to do that, but it may be a few days later than that. And in any case, I think we want to proceed with pricing the latter part of January, plan and closing before the 15th of February. Right now, as we stand, the current all-in rate for all of the bonds, including the senior lien, which are the senior lien bonds and the subordinate lien bonds. So we have two bonds, and all-in rate for all of the bonds is projected to be 3.34%, and that's after all costs and expenses.
That rate's good. We can
Hopefully,
keep it.
I hope we can keep it. That's where the market is right now. And I think looking at the pandemic and things slowing down and people not feeling too comfortable, at least in our favor, hopefully, the rates stay as low, at least till January.
That'd be great.
Happy to answer any questions. Everybody's working hard. It's been a while since I've worked on weekends, but here we are. It's trying to get through the whole process.
We appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a Merry Christmas, all of you.
Thank you.
Merry Christmas.
You too. Thank you.
Chairman, Directors, next item on your agenda is the consent agenda. All matters listed under the consent agenda are considered to be routine by the governing body and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items. However, if discussion is desired, that item or items will be removed from the consent agenda and will be considered separately.
Can I get a motion for approval of the consent agenda?
So moved.
Motion and second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Okay, let's go to the regular agenda, item 3B.
Yes, sir.
Resolution 2021-73.
Yes, sir. Adoption of fiscal year 2022 operating capital for the Hidalgo County Regional Mobility Authority. Chairman, Director, staff recommends that the board adopt the budget as presented earlier. And we'll answer any questions you may have.
Were there any questions to the budget? If not, I'd entertain a motion for approval.
Motion to approve the budget.
I have a motion, a second by Alonso, motion by Joaquin. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Resolution 2021-50, consideration approval of the contract amendment number 7, professional service agreement between Blatten and Associates to increase the maximum payable amount for work authorization number 8.
Chairman, we skipped 3C, which is 2021-49. Consideration and approval of work authorization.
Okay,
This is for environmental services for developing a site soil and planting strategies, including monitoring for the 365 tollway wetland mitigation site. This is basically the presentation Eric made earlier. Staff is recommending approval of work authorization number 8 in the amount of $400,103.66. Again, this will be done. This work will be spread over a 5 or 6 year period, which is the life of the mitigation project.
Okay, so can I get approval for resolution 2021-49, work authorization number 8 with Blatten and Associates?
So moved.
Motion by Forrest. Did I get a second?
Second.
Second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Resolution 2021-50. Consideration of approval of contract amendment number 7.
Yes, sir. This is just to approve the contract, the maximum payable amount for work authorization that you just approved. Staff recommends approval.
Can you get a motion?
So moved.
Get a motion by Frank. Can I get a second? Joaquin. All in favor say aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Aye.
Resolution 2021-51. Consideration and approval of work authorization number 5 with HDR Engineering.
Yes, sir. Again, this is for the wetland mitigation. The items that are in his presentation. This work is authorization number 5 is in the amount of $310,039.40. Staff recommends approval.
Can you get a motion?
So moved.
Got a motion by Alonso. Can I get a second?
Second.
Second by Forrest. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Resolution 2021-74. Consideration of approval of work authorization number 6 with HDR Engineering for engineering support.
Yes, sir. This is for HDR's effort to help us evaluate the value engineering change proposals, which this is an item further down on your agenda. This the amount of $79,429.57. These fees will be taken from the savings in the proposed change order. We'll explain that in a later agenda item, but basically we have the gross savings, and then we'll take out our cost to get there, and then we have the net savings. So staff recommends approval.
Could I get a motion for resolution 2021-74?
Move by Zeke.
Got a motion by Zeke. Can I get a second?
Second.
Second by Joaquin. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Item G, resolution 2021-52, consideration of approval, amendment number 3.
Yes, sir. This is just increase the maximum payable amount for work authorization 5 and work authorization 6, which is just approved to HDR. Staff recommends approval.
Can I get a motion for approval?
Motion to approve.
Motion by Joaquin, second by Forrest. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Resolution 21-76, authorizing the issuance, sale, and delivery of Hidalgo County Regional Mobility Senior Lien Toll revenue bonds.
Yes, sir. And vehicle registration fee revenue bond series 2022A and junior lien toll and vehicle registration fee revenue and refunding bond series 2022B, approving and authorizing the execution and delivery of the master trust indenture, the first supplemental indenture, and the second supplemental indenture, authorizing certain designated officers to approve the terms, interest rate, and redemption features of such bonds and any bond insurance and any reserve fund surety policies in respect to the bonds, authorizing the redemption and or discharge of certain outstanding obligations of the Hidalgo County Regional Mobility Authority, authorizing and approving the execution and delivery of bonds, purchase agreements, and any and all related documents, agreements, certificates, and instruments necessary or desirable to be executed and delivered in connection and delivered such bonds and enacting other provisions related to the subject. And so the chairman and directors, this basically authorizes us to go forward with the next issuance of debt and primarily toll revenue bonds. We've got Baron Wallace on the line, who's basically authored this resolution to answer any technical questions you may have. As part of this, what we do need is we need the board to establish the pricing committee, which historically that's been 3 members of the board that will accept, when we price the bonds, that will accept the interest rate and the terms and conditions and lock us in on that sale. And so staff recommends you approve this and that you name the pricing committee for this.
Are there any questions about resolution 2021-76? If not, I entertain a motion for approval. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Alonso, second.
Second.
Second by Frank. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Motion carries. Resolution 2021-78, consideration and approval of change order number 2 to the construction contract with Paulus Construction for 365 toll project from 281 Military Highway to FM 396.
Chairman, were you gonna appoint the pricing committee?
You already have one. I think Forrest, myself, and Paul, I believe, right?
Yes, sir.
That's fine. Thank you.
We'll review that.
Okay, thank you. Resolution 2021-78 is consideration and approval of change order number 2 to the construction contract with Paulus Construction for the 365 tollway project from US 281 Military Highway to FM 396 on St. Louis Highway. Chairman directors, we sent this to you late today because we were negotiating with a contractor up to the last minute. We sent this as an email, but basically we've gone through the VECP. Just give me a second. Sure. This is the wrong packet. This is the one. So basically, we've visited with the contractor, and we looked at various value engineering change proposal items. We've gone through a list of them. In the separate packet that we sent, we looked at initially 18 items, and out of those 18 items, and it's very lengthy document, so I'm going through it right now. Do you have your packet there?
I don't have the
last one.
No,
This is not the Chairman, if you give me a second, I've got the wrong, I don't have the most up-to-date packet. So let me just grab that so I can go over the items that,
I've got the one that's provide a contingency fund for the project of $5 million and authorize the project construction total of $286,723,797.95. Is that the
there.
yes, sir.
On the screen.
Yes.
That's the last one that I received this morning.
Yeah, that's it. Okay, so basically, the contract was awarded at $932,420.25. We went through the VCP process. We looked at 18 items. We were left with approximately a dozen items. So we've been able to increase the contract amount from $295,000 to $723,000, excuse me, $797.95. That includes a $5 million contingency is included in that amount. It's a next exhibit.
It's last.
Yeah. There it is. There we go. Can you see this on your screen?
Not yet.
Okay.
Let me know.
Okay, so these are the 18 VSCP concepts that we evaluated, and you can see basically the last column, that's today's date, is the acceptance savings. So for column 1, we had almost $14 million for VCP concept 1. For VCP concept 4, we found it. We had $316,000 saving. For concept 5, we had $823,000. For concept 7, we had $7.1 million. For concept 8, $7.3 million. For concept 9, $2.3 million. For concept 10, we had $1.7 million. For concept 13, we had $1.1 million. For concept 15, we had $1.1 million, almost 1.2. And then for 18, we had $1.9 million. So aggregately, we had $38,010,382.63. So I'm gonna back up to the change order and show you the breakdown on that.
It's the same one.
Yeah, scroll up here. Yeah, right here. So this is the way we broke it down. Out of the $38 million in gross savings, we backed out the design fees and our owner's fees to evaluate this, which left us with a net savings of $35,521,555.76. And then that is split as per the contract 60-40. So it's $21 million to the contractor and $14 million to the authority. And this basically gets the project to be financeable because we needed to save about $10 million And so that 14 includes about 10 million savings plus approximately 5 million in contingencies. And so basically we can finance the project now. So we're recommending approval of this change order, which will allow us to proceed to final design. So there'll be a subsequent change order coming to the board. It'll be change order number 3 when the contractor gets to final design. But basically, what the contractor has done with this $35,521,555 is that he's taken on all the risk. If he has any errors, omissions, overages, anything, he has to eat out of his 60% savings. And that is part of our contract document. Eric's running the cursor over that paragraph and basically says, to the extent actual cost exceeds the amount presented in Exhibit A, the contractor agrees to such overages due to errors, oversights, omissions, additions, or corrections to the final units or unit pricing, and it shall be deducted from the contractor's 60% portion of the net savings. So basically, the contractor has taken the risk to ensure that we're guaranteed these savings. And then, of course, the payments will be as he progresses, as the contractor progresses. So they'll get a payment at 20% completion, 40%, 60%, and 80%. And what this allows us to do is reconcile along the way and make sure we are realizing the savings. And then if we don't realize the savings, you scroll down a little bit further, we have language in the change order that the parties agree that if the savings are not apparent or justified during the designated progress periods, all or part of any such saving payments on the recommendation of the general engineering consultant may be deferred to the next progress period, or will be reduced to reflect the contractor's risk for unrealized savings or overages. And so we've got checks and balances all along the way to make sure that the contractor produces what he says he can produce. And so basically, staff is recommending change order number 2, which provides us with a revised contract amount of $286,723,797.95. And of course,
the only question on this is that that's $5 million contingency. How is that going to be funded in the event it has to be funded?
So those are for the items. Those are for the items that the contractor did not touch. That, in other words, so this change order to about 80% of the value of the project is impacted by change order number 2. So the contractor has risk on approximately 80% of the value of the contract. The $5 million that we're setting aside is for the 20%, which equates to about $60 million that the contractor did not provide any value engineering change proposals on. In the event we have overages there, that $5 million will be utilized to take care of anything that from the original designer that may be impacted. And so that's how that $5 million will be utilized, Chairman. I don't know if that answers your question.
Well,
And it'll be funded from proceeds when we issue the bonds.
Yes. Yeah, it's funded through the bonds. Yes, sir.
Blakely, this is Zeke. When we're talking about overages or overruns, we're talking about any and all risk by any and all parties. Is that correct?
For the items that show that they've been altered through the VECP, we've got language in this change order that the contractor has had time to make the assessment. He's done a 30% design on those items. And should there be a difference between the initial design, the schematics, and the final design, the contractor is going to carry the risk of those savings. And then in the implementation, if savings are not realized for some reason, it comes off of the contractor's side.
But is there any contingency on there that excludes any parties that may have been responsible for overages? Are we doing a blanket coverage?
The contract continues to have the force majeure language that it had initially. And that's just some standard text dot language. So the force majeure remains in there. On the line items that the contractor is not changing or proposing a change to, then those would continue to fall under the original design that the RMA contracted with our engineering firms. And those would be subject to errors and omissions from the original firms.
Okay.
There's also, I mean, there's still a process for ordinary change orders along the way. So if TxDOT requested something or we had another need for a change order, it's possible that something could come up that would fall on our side of the ledger, but it would have to be outside of the proposed BECP concepts.
I don't want to get too technical, but there's no indemnity provisions between general contractors and subs that would impact or affect the authority.
And we do have indemnification language in the contract, and we've got, of course, the payment and performance bond attached to the contract. Are you thinking of something different? We've got a warranty on the concrete, a 1-year warranty on the project, I think 2 years on the concrete, payment and performance bond, and standard indemnification provisions for negligence and other errors.
Negligence and stuff like that. I want to stay out of the fight between the GC and the subs or between subs. I don't want to make sure they don't bring us in. If any, whenever there may be a case.
Yeah, so the GEC is not going to carry E&O on the design. That's going to come from the engineering firms that we originally hired. I actually think that HDR was brought in after most of this engineering was complete. Is that right, Pharr?
That's correct.
And so the errors and omissions would fall under the professional services contracts of those engineers. To the extent that the contractor has presented ideas under BECP, they are carrying the burden of that design. So it would be between them and their design team if there were an error or omission. If we had to pay anything out, it would come from the $21 million that we've got in the contractor's bucket that we're referring to as contractor's risk.
Thank you.
Are there any questions or any other questions? If not, I'd entertain a motion for approval.
So moved by Zeke.
Did I have a motion?
Yes, moved by Zeke.
Make a motion by Zeke. Can I get a second?
Second.
I have a second by Joaquin. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
And then, Chairman, just one more comment. The contractor has signaled to us that there's potential for more savings in the project going forward, more items that they are proposing. So we'll probably come back with you with, I don't know the order of magnitude yet, but they'll probably come back to you in the future with more savings on the project. And because the contractor has we bet those. But with that said, Chairman, we have no further business for your consideration.
Okay. I'd just like to wish everybody a happy Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and to tell you that I really appreciate all the hard work that went into what you've done this past year. Bilal, too, and your team, congratulations on an outstanding job. I think, really, really pleased with the progress we've made as Hidalgo County RMA. So, we finally looks like we're going to get this project underway, and it's been a long time since we've all been working on this. So congratulations again. Pilar, thank you for your hard work and your team. So Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to each and every one of you.
Merry Christmas.
You too, David. Thank you.
Everybody stay
Merry
safe.
Christmas, guys.
Merry Christmas. Thank you.
Happy New Year.
Merry Christmas.
Thank you. Joaquin, gracias, Joaquin.
Me llegó el regalito.
Sí, gracias. Thank you very much. A ver cuándo nos juntamos.
Joaquin, thank you very much.
Don't be a stranger, Joaquin.
Thank you, and
Thank you.
keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Have a nice Sunday season.